Okay, let's just unpack this. Imagine for a second that you have a map.
Okay.
A really old, like incredibly detailed map that is supposed to lead you straight to a treasure.
Right.
And this is a treasure that changes your life. It solves your problems, gives you peace, the whole 9 yards.
The ultimate prize.
Exactly. But over the centuries, the people who inherited this map, they become so completely obsessed with the map itself.
So.
Like how to fold it correctly, what kind of paper it's printed on, the specific chemical composition of the ink used to draw the lines.
Right, the frame it sits in.
Yes. They get so caught up in the preservation of the map that they actually completely stop looking for the treasure. They just worship the map.
That is a very potent image to start us off with.
Yeah.
And honestly, it isn't just a poetic metaphor. It is the central thesis of the Axis of Truth article series that we are breaking down today.
Right. So we are looking at a stack of articles here.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. Specifically, we have the fossilization of Islam, Islam and Islam, the orphaned believer, and a few others from that same source.
Muhammad according to the Qur'an, and how Hadith hijacked revelation are in there too.
Right. And I have to say, right out of the gate, the premise here is, well, it's provocative.
Highly provocative.
It asks a question that, frankly, might make some people really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the author of these pieces insists it is the only question that actually matters right now.
Which is?
What if the religion known globally as Islam actually creates a barrier to the very revelation it claims to uphold?
It's a heavy question.
Very.
It is the kind of question that usually gets you kicked out of a dinner party pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely.
But our job today is to unpack the argument. And the core concept the author uses to explain this whole phenomenon is fossilization.
Okay, so just to be completely clear for the listener, we are not talking about dinosaurs here.
Well, in a structural way, we actually kind of are.
Wait, really?
Think about what a fossil actually is. You look at a fossil of a leaf, right?
Right.
It looks exactly like the leaf. It has the exact shape, the veins, the outline. It looks perfect.
Sure.
But it's rock. It's just stone. The organic life that once animated it, the sap, the cellular growth, the movement, all of that is totally gone.
It's dead.
Exactly. It is a perfect preservation of the form, but entirely devoid of the life.
And the argument being made in these articles is that mainstream institutional Islam has become that fossil.
That is exactly the argument. The institution preserves the form.
The mechanics of it.
Right. The prayers, the dress codes, the architecture, down to the specific beard lengths.
The ink on the map.
Yes. It's all there, perfectly preserved in stone. But the author argues it has lost the life. And the life in this context is that direct, unmediated connection to the source.
Okay, before we dive into the deep end here, and we're going to dive very deep, we need to do a quick sanity check.
Let's do it.
We are looking at 5 specific articles today. We listed them, but just as a disclaimer for everyone listening right now, we are here to report on and unpack the arguments presented in these texts.
Yes, this is an analysis of the source material.
Right. This is an intellectual critique found in these specific writings. We aren't here to endorse the theology.
We aren't here to convert anyone.
And we definitely aren't taking sides in a religious or political debate. Whether you lean left, right, or center, that's not what this is about.
Not at all.
We are just here to explore a really fascinating systematic argument about how institutions decay.
Precisely. Because whether you are religious, spiritual, or just a student of how human organizations work.
You can learn something from this.
Exactly. Bureaucracy, control, losing the original intent. There is a lot to learn here because this pattern happens to literally everything.
It happens to tech startups.
It happens to governments. And yes, it happens to religions.
So let's go back to that fossil metaphor, because the author makes a really interesting linguistic distinction right off the bat.
The capitalization thing.
Yeah, and it sort of frames the entire discussion. The difference between Islam with a lowercase I and Islam with a capital I.
Right.
Now, in English, we just capitalize proper nouns all the time, so this might sound like pure semantics to someone just casually reading.
It does sound like a technicality.
Is the author just playing word games here?
It sounds like semantics, but it is actually the cornerstone of the entire argument. In the source material, the author points out that in the Qur'an itself, the word Islam is used as a verb.
A verb.
A state of being. It literally translates to surrender, or alignment, or peace. It represents an action.
The act of doing something.
Right, the act of surrendering one's will to the source of existence.
So in that sense, it is not a brand name.
Not at all.
It's a description of what you were doing, kind of like, I don't know, breathing or running.
Correct. It is meant to be universal. The source material notes that the Qur'an describes nature itself as being in a state of Islam.
Because nature follows the laws of physics.
Exactly. It surrenders to the design. It also describes figures like Abraham, Moses, and Jesus as having Islam.
Which obviously predates the religion we know today.
Right. It's not a club.
Mm.
But the capital, Islam, the noun, that is the brand.
That's the team jersey.
That's the political identity, the demographic checkbox on a census form.
So the author is basically arguing that the Qur'an never intended to start a quote-unquote religion in the modern sense.
That is the claim.
Like with a clergy and a hierarchy and a specific cultural uniform.
The source argues it was meant to restore a universal orientation toward God. The term deen mentioned in the text isn't a religion like we think of the Catholic Church or Buddhism.
It's broader than that.
It's a system or a way of life.
It's really like the difference between running as an exercise and joining a specific running club.
Go on, flesh that out for a second.
Oh, running is just running. You put on your shoes, you go outside, you move your legs.
Right.
It is between you and the road. It's good for your heart. You feel the wind. It's an action.
Pure action.
But if you join, let's say, the Downtown Harriers Running Club.
Okay.
Suddenly you have to pay monthly dues, you have to wear the official club colors on race day.
You have to vote for the club president at the annual banquet.
Exactly. You have to
Yeah.
attend the mixer, and eventually you end up with people in the club who are completely obsessed with the bylaws.
They know the whole history of the club founder.
Right, they argue about the exact shade of blue on the club jersey.
But they haven't actually run a single mile in 5 years.
Yes.
That is a perfect analogy for what the author is describing. The source argues that the exact moment you switch from the action, the running or the surrender, to the institution, the club, or the religion, you start the process of fossilization.
You start protecting the organization instead of doing the verb.
You prioritize the preservation of the club over the act of running.
And the articles give some really scathing examples of what this looks like in actual practice.
Especially regarding rituals.
Yes. I was reading the section on salat, the prayer, and the language used by the author is, well, it's intense.
It pulls no punches.
The author literally calls modern prayer gymnastics.
Gymnastics and choreography. This is where the critique gets very tangible for the listener. The author argues that for many people today, the focus has shifted entirely to the physical performance.
The mechanics again?
Right. Are your feet exactly 6 inches apart? Are your hands raised to the correct level by your ears? Did you recite the Arabic formula with perfect pronunciation?
It just becomes a checklist.
It becomes a compliance test. The source argues that people are being taught to count movements rather than intentions.
Wow.
It says the essence of salat is supposed to be connection or a conscious remembrance,
Like a meditation.
a mental and spiritual recalibration. But instead, it has become a mechanical checklist. You do your 5 sets of reps and you are done for the day. You punch your spiritual time card.
And there's a theological contradiction that the source points out there too, isn't there?
Yes,
Yeah.
a major one. It explicitly says God does not need our worship.
Right, which seems obvious, but we forget it.
It's a crucial distinction. The prostration isn't for his sake. The author points out that God is not some insecure king who needs human beings bowing down to feel important.
So who is it for?
It is entirely for the human's benefit, to align the body and the soul, to reset your compass.
But if you are just going through the motions like a robot,
Then the connection is completely severed, the fossil is polished, it looks perfectly like a prayer,
but it's dead.
but it's stone.
Man. Then there is the Hajj, the pilgrimage.
Yes.
This one really hit me hard when I was reading the prep material. The text describes it as shifting from this beautiful symbol of human unity to, and I quote, tourism of the flesh.
Tourism of the flesh, that is a biting phrase.
It really is.
The author strongly critiques the idolization of the physical structures in Mecca, the Kaaba and the Black Stone specifically.
Because it becomes about the objects.
The argument is that pilgrims are circling a stone structure, as if God literally lives inside those walls.
Which goes against the core theology, right?
Completely. And the text points out how desperate people are to touch or kiss the Black Stone.
Like it has magical powers.
Exactly. As if it has batteries that charge them up with holiness if they just make physical contact.
But the Quran itself implies, or honestly explicitly states, that God is everywhere. I remember the quote from the source, "Wherever you turn, there is the face of God."
Exactly right. So the source argues that the fossilized believer travels thousands and thousands of miles to touch a piece of rock, but totally neglects the divine presence that is already breathing within them.
They are looking outside for something that is supposed to be inside.
It's externalizing the internal. It is seeking the God of the building in the building itself.
It's the error of confusing the symbol for the reality. We're back to worshiping the map instead of finding the treasure.
Precisely. And there is one more layer to this fossilization process that the text mentions.
Oh, right.
I think it's incredibly relevant to our modern administrative world, the calendar of control.
Yes, the shift from actual observation to rigid bureaucracy. I found this fascinating because we completely take calendars for granted today. We just glance at our phones.
We do. But the source argues that originally, time in this tradition was incredibly fluid.
It was tied to nature.
Yes. You had to sight the moon to know when the new month started. You observed the position of the sun to know when it was time for prayer.
Which forces you to actually look at the world.
It connected you to the natural cosmos. It forced you to physically look up at the sky. It forced you to be present in the universe and acknowledge the design.
But human institutions absolutely hate fluidity.
They despise it.
You can't schedule a global board meeting or collect taxes based on whenever the moon looks right in your specific village.
Exactly. Institutions need certainty. They need administration and standardization.
So they created these rigid, pre-calculated calendars.
And the text makes a profound observation here. It says, the sighting of a crescent moon became more important than the sighting of the self. The tools that were originally designed to remind humanity of the divine order just became mechanisms of human administration.
It just became about the paperwork.
It became about control. And frankly, that is the perfect segue into the next massive section of these source articles.
Right, because if you have a fossilized structure, a massive complex club with bylaws and calendars, you need someone to maintain it.
You need curators for the museum.
Section 2, the mechanism of control, or, as our outline beautifully puts it, the rise of intermediaries.
Now, this is where the argument gets really spicy.
Let's get into it.
Because the source claims that the Qur'an explicitly, repeatedly, warns against the creation of a priesthood.
Wait, really? Because I always thought imams and sheikhs were just part of the original deal, like baked into the religion from day one.
According to this author, absolutely not. The articles cite specific verses warning believers against taking scholars and monks as lords beside God.
That's a strong warning.
The core message of the Qur'an, according to this analysis, is a direct, unbreakable link between the individual and the creator.
No middleman.
No middleman. No switchboard operator connecting your call.
And yet,
the author argues that mainstream Islam developed a massive, sprawling priesthood in all but name.
you have the imams, the sheikhs, the mullahs, the scholars, the muftis.
Exactly.
But wait, I can hear the counter-argument from people already, and I kind of have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please do.
Because these figures, they don't call themselves priests. They say they're just teachers or guides.
Right.
And isn't there a genuine value in expertise? Like, if I want to learn quantum physics, I go to a physics professor.
Of course.
If I have a terrible illness, I go to an oncologist. I don't try to read a medical textbook in my basement and operate on myself.
No, that would end badly.
Right. So why is religion different? Why shouldn't there be experts who study the text for decades and explain it to the rest of us?
That is the standard defense.
Uh-huh.
And on the surface, it is a very strong one.
It makes logical sense.
It does. But the source argues that you have to look at the function of these roles, not just the title they give themselves.
Okay, unpack that.
The difference is that a physics professor teaches you the universal laws of physics, so you can eventually understand them yourself and do your own experiments.
Right.
An oncologist treats your illness, but they don't claim to possess exclusive ownership of the concept of health.
They are providing a service.
But the text describes what it calls a wall around the book.
A wall.
Yes. The argument is that these religious figures effectively claimed ownership of the Qur'an. They insisted that the ordinary person, you, me, the person listening right now, cannot possibly understand this divine message without their expert mediation.
So it's not, let me teach you how to fish.
No.
It's, you are expressly forbidden from fishing because the ocean is way too dangerous for a layperson, so you have to buy all your fish from me.
That is exactly what it is. They claim the text was too complex, or too dangerous, or too subtle for the uneducated masses.
So they set themselves up as the ultimate gatekeepers.
You can't access the true meaning of God's word unless you go through their specific interpretation, their commentary, their historical jurisprudence.
They inserted themselves straight into the chain of command.
And by doing that, they create a permanent dependency loop.
Because you need the expert to understand the message.
And the expert is the one telling you that you need him.
It's a perfect business model.
It is. And this leads to a concept the author introduces that I found absolutely brilliant, the orphan argument.
Oh, yes. This was the emotional core of the entire critique for me. Can you break this down for the listener?
The source asks a very simple, very direct question. It acts as a litmus test for anyone involved in any kind of spiritual group or hierarchy.
Okay.
If your teacher, your sheikh, or your imam vanished tomorrow, would you feel closer to God or would you feel spiritually orphaned?
Oof, that is a rough question.
It's devastating.
Because I think a lot of people would say they'd feel orphaned.
Exactly.
Mm.
But if the answer is orphaned, if you feel like you've completely lost your connection, like your spiritual Wi-Fi signal just dropped because the router got unplugged,
Then according to the source, the system is a total failure.
because the Quran leaves no one orphaned.
The text says God is closer than your jugular vein.
Right. So if you feel orphaned, it proves that your connection was actually to the human being, not to the source.
You were tethered to the guide, not the destination.
Only a system that intentionally creates dependency leaves you feeling orphaned when the middleman is removed.
Because if the guide was actually doing their job correctly, they would be connecting you directly to the source. They would be making themselves obsolete.
It's like if you hire a personal trainer at the gym,
Yeah.
and they train you for 2 years. But then they go on vacation for a month, and you suddenly realize you don't even know how to do a proper push-up by yourself.
Because they just set the machines for you and counted your reps.
Exactly. They haven't actually taught you fitness. They have just made you completely dependent on them managing your workout.
That is a flawless analogy. And the source takes specific aim at certain traditions here, right? Like Sufism and the strict spiritual hierarchies.
Very heavily. It critiques the whole concept of spiritual lineages, the chains of transmission.
The idea that you need a quote-unquote living master to validate your connection to the divine.
Right. The text calls this substitution,
Mean.
meaning the follower begins to believe that obedience to the sheikh is identical to obedience to God.
That's dangerous territory.
The critique is that this is actually a form of shirk by proxy.
Okay, can you define shirk for the listeners who might not be familiar with the theology?
Sure. Shirk is basically the unforgivable sin in Islamic theology. It means idolatry, or associating partners with God.
When people hear idolatry, they usually think of, bowing down to a golden calf or worshiping a statue of the sun.
Right, the primitive stuff. But the author argues that by inserting a living human being into the channel of grace,
By saying, I cannot reach God without the blessing of this specific sheikh.
you are committing a highly subtle, modern form of idolatry. You are literally associating a human being with the power of the divine.
You are putting a toll booth on the highway to heaven.
And the source astutely notes that this spiritual toll booth very often comes with a literal financial fee.
Yes, the economic critique. I was waiting to get to this part. Because usually in history, whenever you find a dependency loop, if you look closely enough, you find a cash register.
It is incredibly hard to ignore. The source observes this bluntly. If these intermediaries were truly, purely sincere about guiding souls to God, why do they have massive business models?
Right. Why are there expensive weekend retreats?
Why are there monthly subscriptions for exclusive spiritual content?
Monetized access, the VIP inner circles.
Exactly. There's a quote that stuck out to me. The Quran does not require a business model.
Revelation shouldn't have a paywall.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it implies that if you are truly guiding someone to independence, as we said, you put yourself out of a job.
Which is bad for business.
Very bad for business. If you are building a global follower base, you need them to stay dependent.
You need the subscription to renew next month.
You need them to come back for the Part 2 seminar to get the real secrets.
Which is how institutions naturally survive. They fundamentally need dependent constituents.
But the source says this is the exact opposite of the Quranic mission.
Because the mission is what?
To create responsible, autonomous, moral agents.
Responsible agents. That word responsible is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It is. Because if you have a priest or a sheikh, you can just outsource your conscience.
Oh, that's so true. You just ask, is this business deal right?
And the priest says yes or no.
I don't know. Let me ask the imam if this is a sin.
Right. But if you don't have a priest to ask,
Then you have to decide. You have to read the book, engage your brain, and actually carry the full weight of that moral decision.
and for those people, that is absolutely terrifying.
People say they want freedom, but deep down, they really just want security.
They want someone to hand them a manual and tell them exactly what to do so they aren't to blame on Judgment Day if it all goes wrong.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are. We have the fossilization of the beautiful original rituals,
Right.
and we have the rise of a powerful priesthood class that explicitly wasn't supposed to exist according to the foundational text.
Yes.
But the obvious question is, how did they pull this off?
Right, historically.
I mean, if the central book literally says, no priesthood, no middlemen, how do you build a massive global priesthood and convince 1 billion people it is completely normal and required?
The source answers this with a very specific, and I should warn, a highly controversial claim.
Section 3.
The hijacking of revelation by hadith.
The parallel scripture. This is arguably the most explosive part of the entire analysis we read.
It fundamentally challenges the core architecture of the mainstream religion.
Okay, for those listening who might not have the theological background, can you briefly define what hadith is in this context?
Yep.
Because it is very different from the Quran.
They are completely distinct things.
Right.
In mainstream Islam, the Qur'an is viewed as the direct, verbatim word of God revealed to the Prophet Muhammad.
The primary source.
Right. Hadith, on the other hand, is a massive collection of reports.
Things he supposedly said.
Said, did, or silently approved of. And crucially, these were written down, collected, categorized, and compiled generations after his actual death.
Usually hundreds of years later, right?
Yes, mostly a couple centuries later.
So the Quran is the core message, and hadith is like the biography, the commentary, the extra sayings.
Correct. And the source's take on the role these hadith play today is, well, it's not positive.
To put it very mildly.
The author argues that the Quran has effectively been abandoned by replacement.
Abandoned by replacement. That's a great phrase.
It means people didn't openly say, we reject the Quran. They didn't stop printing it or reciting it.
They just buried it.
They buried it under an absolute mountain of secondary texts.
The phrase the article uses is literally the hijacking.
Yes. And the argument rests on a very clear logical contradiction.
Walk us through the logic problem.
Well, the Quran repeatedly describes itself within its own text as complete. It says it is fully detailed.
And sufficient.
Yes. It calls itself al-Furqan, which means the criterion.
No, it's supposed to be the ultimate measuring stick.
Exactly. So the author poses the logic problem. If the instructions are explicitly complete, why do you need an appendix that is 50 times longer than the actual book?
Right. If the Quran is complete, what exactly are the hadith completing?
That's the trap. If you say, well, the Quran is perfect, but it really needs the hadith to explain how to live, you are effectively declaring that the Quran is insufficient on its own.
You are contradicting the book's own claim about itself.
Yes. But the author's argument goes deeper. It isn't just that these extra texts are unnecessary baggage.
What's the real danger?
The danger is that they are actively used to override the original intent of the revelation.
Ah.
The source argues they aren't completing the guidance. They are establishing political and social power.
How exactly do they do that?
By fundamentally changing the focus of the entire religion.
From what to what?
The source argues that the Quran intensely focuses on macro issues.
The big stuff.
Ethics, justice, conscience, how you treat the orphan and the poor, how you stand up against tyranny, how you observe the universe.
The hard stuff. The stuff that actually requires you to look in the mirror and change your heart.
Exactly. But the Hadith literature, according to this critique, shifts the entire focus of the believer to micromanagement.
Oh, right. The meticulous daily rules.
Hygiene, the exact acceptable length of a beard. Which foot you're supposed to step into the bathroom with, how you trim your mustache, how high your pants should sit above your ankles.
The totally measurable stuff.
For performative stuff.
Right. Because it is incredibly easy to measure if someone's beard is the officially approved length. I can just look at your face and judge you.
But I can't look at you and easily measure if you're acting with profound justice in your private life.
I can see your pants. I can't see your heart.
And this shift from the macro to the micro creates what the source dramatically calls the fireborn elite.
The fireborn elite. It sounds like a faction in a fantasy novel.
It does. But it refers to the scholarly clerical class. The argument here is brilliant. It says that a highly complex religion inherently benefits the ruling class.
Why is that?
Because if the religion is incredibly simple, if the core rule is just be just and serve God, then literally anyone can do it.
A peasant farmer can do it.
Exactly. And more importantly, a peasant can use that simple standard to call out the king.
Because the standard is universally clear.
Right. If the king steals land, the peasant can stand up and say, hey, the book says do not steal. You are violating the law.
It's open source morality. What
But
if the religion is
if
complex?
the religion is based on tens of thousands of complex, often contradictory reports that require decades of specialized linguistic and historical study to navigate,
Then the peasant is locked out.
you need professionals. You need a scholarly class to step in and tell the peasant, well, actually, it looks like theft. But there is a specific hadith that says you must obey the ruler even if he strikes your back and takes your property.
Wow. So complexity is weaponized as a tool of control.
That is the core argument of this section. The source notes the vital historical context here. When were these hadith compiled?
Centuries later.
During times of massive empire building and brutal civil war. The Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties.
And emperors need subjects to behave.
They desperately needed a theology that supported their political power structures. A simple, revolutionary Qur'an that preaches radical equality and justice was incredibly dangerous to an emperor.
But a massive, legalistic, bureaucratic hadith corpus that focuses people on bathroom etiquette instead of political revolution.
Highly useful to the state.
It effectively drowned out the clear voice of the original revelation with the deafening noise of bureaucracy.
And it shifted the ultimate authority. The text says, the words of men replace the word of God. The center of gravity moved away from the divine text and onto the human report.
Which naturally leads us to the central figure of the faith. Because if you are going to rely entirely on hadith, which are essentially sayings of the prophet, you have to establish a very specific view of who the prophet actually was.
Yes. And this brings us right into section 4, demystifying the messenger.
Man versus myth.
The source draws an incredibly sharp contrast here between two different versions of the same historical figure.
Right.
On one side, you have the traditional Muhammad, the figure presented in the later hadith and the sprawling biographical literature.
How is he portrayed there?
Often as entirely supernatural. He is infallible, meaning he literally cannot make a mistake. He acts as an independent source of divine law.
He knows the future.
He performs constant miracles. He is this figure of towering cosmic mystique.
A superhero.
A demigod, essentially.
Mm.
But then you have the Quranic Muhammad, the portrait painted by the actual revelation.
And how is that different?
It is remarkably grounded human.
The source lists some very specific details that the Quran goes out of its way to highlight.
Yes. It points out that he eats regular food. He walks around in the busy markets like an ordinary guy.
He worries. He forgets things.
He makes mistakes.
He doesn't float above the ground.
No floating, no glowing aura. And most importantly, the text emphasizes over and over that he absolutely does not know the future.
There are specific verses quoted where he is commanded by God to say to the people, I do not possess the treasures of God, nor do I know the unseen.
He is just a man with a message.
And there's that one specific incident the article highlights, the blind man. I think this is fascinating.
Oh, Surah Abasa. He frowned and turned away. This is a crucial, undeniable piece of evidence for the author's argument.
Break this down for us. What happened?
It's a moment captured in the text where the prophet is deeply engaged in a conversation with some very powerful, wealthy tribal leaders. He is desperately trying to convert them because if they convert, it helps the whole struggling community.
He's playing politics. He's focused on the VIPs.
Right. And right in the middle of this, a blind man, a poor, ordinary believer, interrupts him, seeking some spiritual guidance.
And the prophet gets annoyed.
In a completely relatable moment of human frustration, he frowns and physically turns his back on the blind man.
A very human reaction, like, can't you see I'm busy with something critical here? Just wait a minute.
Exactly. But the revelation instantly drops down and publicly corrects him. An entire chapter of the Quran is revealed, specifically reprimanding him for prioritizing the wealthy and powerful over the sincere, humble seeker.
And that highly embarrassing reprimand is permanently in the book.
That is the key point. The author uses this brilliantly.
Because if this was all a scam...
Right. If this was just a personality cult that he was building for his own ego, or if he was just writing the book himself to consolidate political power, why on earth would he include a permanent, eternal record of God harshly reprimanding him for a moral failure?
It would be like a modern politician publishing an autobiography, but devoting chapter 1 to highlighting the biggest, most embarrassing mistake of their entire career.
You edit that stuff out.
You scrub it from the record.
But the fact that it is there, preserved forever, proves his authentic role. He is a humble messenger transmitting something far greater than himself, something he wasn't allowed to edit.
So the question becomes, why the myth-making? Why did the later traditions work so hard to turn this humble guy in the market into a superhuman, infallible figure?
The author argues it is the fundamental danger of personality cults.
It's a psychological escape hatch.
Exactly. Elevating the messenger into the stratosphere is a subconscious way for the followers to completely avoid the heavy weight of the message.
Now that sounds incredibly counterintuitive at first glance. If I really love the messenger, shouldn't that make me want to follow his message even more?
Not necessarily. Think about the psychology. If the prophet is basically a superhero, if he is fundamentally biologically and spiritually different from us normal people,
Then we can't possibly be expected to act like him.
bingo. We can admire him, we can write beautiful poetry about him, we can throw massive festivals to celebrate his birthday.
But we don't actually have to be like him in the difficult moral sense.
We have an excuse. He is superhuman, I am just a weak human.
So it becomes entirely about sentimental attachment rather than rigorously following the ethical code?
The source literally calls it sentimental attachment and ritual praise. It is infinitely easier to sit in a circle and sing a beautiful song praising the prophet than it is to stand up against a brutal tyrant, or to be scrupulously honest in your business dealings when you can make a quick buck by cheating.
Worshipping the messenger is actually a really great strategy for ignoring the message.
There is a quote from the text here that perfectly summarizes it. The messenger does not replace the message.
The messenger does not replace the message. That is the whole crux of the argument.
The source argues that genuine love for the prophet was effectively hijacked. It morphed from, I will follow the difficult truth he brought, to, I will mindlessly worship his historical memory.
And the text also points out the theological limits of his authority, right?
Yes, the Quran states very clearly that Muhammad cannot guide whomever he loves. Guidance belongs exclusively to God.
Meaning he couldn't even automatically save his own family members if they didn't choose it themselves.
Exactly, and the source draws a brutal but logical conclusion from this fact.
Which is?
If the prophet himself, universally recognized as the best of men, could not unilaterally grant spiritual guidance or salvation to another soul,
Then certainly no modern scholar with a YouTube channel can do it.
no sheikh, no saint, no imam can do it.
It completely circles back to the intermediary problem we talked about in Section 2.
It shatters the priestly model.
Hmm.
If the prophet isn't an intermediary in the sense of granting salvation, then nobody else gets to claim that job either.
He just delivers the mail.
He delivers it. He doesn't read it for you, and he certainly doesn't decide if you are allowed to open it.
Wow. Okay, so let's just pause and look at the vast landscape we have painted here based on these articles.
That's a lot.
We have a completely fossilized faith, fixated on mechanics over meaning,
Yep.
controlled by an elite priestly class that isn't supposed to exist,
Right.
using a massive secondary scripture to override the original simple message,
Yeah.
and wrapping the whole package up in an emotional personality cult to keep the masses distracted from doing the actual moral work.
It sounds incredibly bleak when you list it all out like that.
It really does. It sounds like a perfect system designed to entrap the human soul rather than liberate it.
It does.
Yeah,
But the sources don't just complain. They do actually offer a solution.
the path forward.
Section 5, defossilization and return.
Okay, so what does this defossilization actually look like? Is the author proposing we start a new sect? Like, do we all go join the Axis of Truth movement now?
The author explicitly warns against that.
Yeah.
Absolutely no new sects.
No new clubs.
The source is very clear. Do not become a Qur'anist in a tribal sectarian sense. Do not just trade one identity label for a slightly newer identity label.
Don't leave the Sunni club just to pay dues at the Quran club.
Exactly. The solution isn't building a new institution. The solution is a deeply personal process.
A process of what?
Unlearning.
Unlearning. That honestly sounds way more painful than learning.
Oh, it is. It is the deeply uncomfortable, painful process of actively stripping away centuries of built-up scaffolding.
Scaffolding. I like that visual.
Imagine a massive, breathtakingly beautiful building, but it has been covered in thick wooden scaffolding for a massive renovation project.
Okay.
But the renovation has been going on for 500 years.
So nobody alive has ever seen the actual building.
Exactly. People have completely forgotten there's even a building underneath.
Yeah.
They walk by every day and they think the wooden scaffolding is the building.
They are out there painting the scaffolding. They are worshiping the rusted pipes and the dirty canvas tarps.
Yes. Defossilization simply means having the courage to tear down the scaffolding so you can finally see the magnificent structure underneath.
And that core structure is
The direct, unmediated alignment with God. Islam is a verb.
And what does a human being actually look like when they do this, when they tear down all their internal scaffolding?
The source uses a fascinating, almost political term for this person, the ungovernable human.
I absolutely loved this concept when I read it. The idea that a truly, authentically spiritual person is inherently a massive threat to worldly tyranny.
Think about why a purely Qur'an-centric person is such a threat to a corrupt system.
Because they don't play the game.
Right. They answer to absolutely no human intermediary. They fear no clergy. They cannot be bullied by a scholar.
Because they judge every situation by their own conscience and the direct text rather than bowing to social pressure or tradition.
Exactly. If the state-sponsored imam gets on the pulpit and says, God wants you to hate that group of people, but the person's conscience and the book clearly say, be strictly just and protect the oppressed.
The ungovernable human just ignores the imam.
They reject the fatwa completely.
That makes them incredibly hard to control. You can't threaten them with excommunication because they fundamentally do not believe you hold the keys to heaven in the first place.
It makes them totally free. But as we discussed earlier, true freedom is terrifying.
That is the flip side, isn't it? The absolute responsibility.
The source calls it a terrifying freedom. If there's no sheik to carry your burden, no intercessor who is going to magically save you on Judgment Day, no patron saint to whisper in God's ear to get you a VIP pass,
Then it is all on you.
you are responsible. You have to actually read the book. You have to think critically. You have to make the hard moral choices.
It goes right back to that jugular vein verse.
We are nearer to him than his jugular vein. The source emphasizes this specific verse to reclaim that intimate space.
Because literally nothing can fit in that space. There is no physical or spiritual room for a middleman between your soul and your own neck vein.
It is an incredibly intimate but also terrifying proximity. It means you are never alone.
But you are also never hidden.
Exactly. You can't hide behind a scholar's opinion.
And this realization completely changes the view of Salat, the prayer, all over again. We started this hour by talking about how the author calls modern prayer gymnastics.
Right.
So what does a defossilized prayer actually look like in practice?
It moves away from the gymnastics and returns entirely to connection. It acknowledges that the act of prayer is purely for the human's benefit. It is alignment.
It's not a service provided to a needy deity.
It is a daily recharge, not a spiritual tax payment.
It's a moment of deliberate silence in an otherwise deafeningly noisy world.
It is a profound remembering of that jugular proximity.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We
Right.
have covered a massive amount of theological and historical ground today.
We really have. The scope of these articles is huge.
The core argument is that Islam, the capital I institutional religion, has over centuries become a fossilized shell.
It preserves the form but loses the life.
It protects the political status quo. It serves this fire-born elite of scholars. And it uses massive bureaucratic and ritual complexity to completely obscure the radical, liberating, simple spirituality of the original Qur'an.
And the primary mechanism for this tragic hijacking was the shift from a direct, personal connection with God to a total reliance on intermediaries.
The hadith texts, the scholars, the complex rituals.
It really is a masterclass study in institutional decay. And I want to be extremely clear here at the end. This critique isn't uniquely about Islam.
No, the pattern applies everywhere.
Whether you are Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or even secular, the pattern is identical. An original blazing spark of truth or revolution naturally cools down and turns into a rigid bureaucracy.
The movement inevitably becomes a monument.
Perfectly said.
So, bringing this all the way home for the listener, why should you care about any of this if you aren't Muslim and don't care about Islamic theology?
Because every single one of us deals with massive opaque institutions every day.
We do.
We all deal with self-appointed experts who tell us we cannot possibly understand the source material of our own lives.
Whether that's the legal system, the financial markets, or our own physical health.
We all have elaborate scaffolding in our lives that we have somehow mistaken for the actual building.
It seriously challenges us to look in the mirror and figure out exactly where we are outsourcing our own understanding.
Are you actually thinking for yourself, or are you just downloading a pre-packaged opinion update from your favorite political pundit, your priest, or some influencer on your feed?
That is the challenge. And I want to leave you, the listener, with that final, deeply provocative thought straight from the source material. The orphan test.
The Quran never leaves anyone orphaned. Only systems do.
I want you to really reflect on that today. Look at your own life, your spiritual life, your professional life, your personal relationships.
Are you part of a system that secretly requires your weakness and dependency just to survive?
If your guide, your mentor, your boss, your pastor, or even your favorite podcaster, if they vanished off the face of the earth tomorrow,
Would you be completely lost in the woods?
or would you still know exactly where true north is?
That is the ultimate question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one, but a necessary one.
It was a pleasure. Until next time.
Keep thinking for yourself.